Welcome once again to a lecture on The Moral Animal by Robert Wright. This is David Panush of the Edmund Burke School. This time we're looking at Chapter 3, Part 1 of the chapter, Men and Women. Wright begins by talking about the concept of pair bonding. So in biology, when we see males and females forming a strong, enduring emotional bond, that means it's not very short term. It means they stick around to raise the offspring together, at least for a pretty long period of time. We call that pair bonding. So the question for us at the beginning of the chapter, and for you to continue to think about as you learn more about the mating habits of males and females, human beings, is are we a pair bonding species or not? Wright begins by giving some evidence to suggest that we are. We know that in every culture on record there's been some form of marriage, and marriage might be monogamy, one man, one woman, or it might be polygamy, and that's almost always one man, multiple women. And it might have a form of divorce, or it might only be for a certain period of time, but usually that time is fairly long and involves the time span of trying to raise offspring together. We know that every culture puts the family as the center of their social organization. So one of the things that is another piece of evidence that we are, for the most part, a pair bonding species is this idea of MPI, male parental investment. So in the last chapter we learned about how parental investment is any resource that a parent puts into offspring, and keep in mind that when you're putting resource into one offspring, the offspring in front of you, that is lost opportunity to put resources into yourself to survive, or into your other offspring that you may have, or into future offspring. So that's an important investment, obviously, of your resources. And when it's difficult to survive, putting resources into children is costly, so it's an important thing to do. We know that compared to other species, males of our species have pretty high parental investment. That is compared to most of the other primates and a lot of other mammals. But again, when we compare males to females, if we drew those two normal curves, and you can go back and look at the last lecture if you need a reminder of that, you're going to see that the curve measuring female parental investment on average is going to be higher. There's more parental investment than the curve that's measuring male parental investment on average. But nonetheless, they're pretty close, which means that the interests of the males and the females are pretty well aligned. And the question is, how did this happen? It happened because of the way that our biology has led to really premature birth of human infants. Our heads, where our forebrains are, which gives us so much intelligence and reflection and the ability to adapt to so many environments, is huge relative to the birth canal that females of our species have. So we're born basically premature. And if you look at other species, have you ever seen a video of a horse being born? You can go watch one now if you want to on YouTube. You'll see, the horse comes out and stands up and starts walking and neighing and looking like a horse. Obviously, human babies are vulnerable for quite a long time after they're born. So, male humans who didn't stick around and try and make sure that vulnerable baby survived didn't have grandchildren. And therefore, their genes were not really passed on more than one generation. So we know that males that stuck around and helped their babies survive had more babies, so that becomes the species' typical trait. The other piece that's interesting is that so much of our ability to survive and reproduce is again a competition with each other, and that culture is passed on from parents to children, or from extended family to children, or from the society to children. But we know that fathers who stick around probably gave their children an evolutionary advantage just in teaching them and showing them how to survive and how to be successful in their society, which led to more offspring. Recall that when we talk about how did something evolve, we know it's a behavior, but what drives the behavior? What makes a person want to do these things? And we know this is evidence, we think, for the evolution of love. Love both for the female that the male pair bonds with and for the offspring. And the pair bonding keeps the male around and keeps the male dedicated to this female and her offspring. And then, of course, the love of offspring contributes to the survival of the offspring. So given these qualities, what should we expect, or what do we see when we're thinking about females choosing male mates? They're going to be looking for one or both of two things, and certainly there's some overlap. They're looking for a male that has high MPI, that is a good father, that will stick around and care for the children, and will love them, as an indicator that they'll stick around and care for the children. They're also looking for a male who has high social status, because high social status in the evolutionary environment probably meant more access to resources, better shelter, better places to sleep, better access to food, maybe more protection for your family. So high social status for a male grants the female that is pair bonded to them and their offspring more resources, better chances to survive and reproduce. So I want you to think right now, pause the video and maybe jot down some things. If you were looking for an indicator, just what does it look like that a male is going to be a good father? What are the qualities or characteristics that you think, or emotions you would see that person display that would say, he'll be a good dad? Similarly, what are the qualities or characters or emotions that you think you would see a male display that would indicate that they either will have high social status or already do have high social status? So think about, and the emotion that's going to drive the male to behave this way. What emotions do we want to look for if we're looking for evidence as a female, we're assessing males, that would show these things? And the last point that's important to make here is that females should be competing for males. We're not going to see just males competing for females. We're going to see females competing for males too, because getting the male who has the high MPA, who has the high social status, pays off genetically, and evolutionarily for females. So we should be expecting females to compete pretty intensely for males, just like we see with males. Now again, if we draw those curves, we know the competition among males is going to be greater than the competition among females, but they're both going to be pretty high. And we'll talk about that in this slide. So what are the males looking for in a female mate? Well, they're going to be looking for fertility. And what are the physical indicators of fertility? Looking at hip to waist ratios and figures and signals of health. And that's perhaps going to explain why males seem to be more focused on physical attractiveness than females do. And they're more thinking about MPI or social status. Similarly, we know, because males are eager, as we learned in the last chapter, that they, when the opportunity arises, are going to be looking to try and have as much sex as possible. So they may be looking for, what does this female bring to the table in terms of short-term possibilities versus long-term? Because once a male is going to pair bond, that's a different sort of assessment than the short-term investment. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second and why those would be different. But we know that males might be assessing females differently depending on whether or not they're talking about a short-term liaison or a long-term pair bonding experience. Now, we know from our nearest primate relatives, and we know because of our studies of lots of cultures, that when you have when you're at the top of the food chain, so to speak, or have the highest social status as a male, your payoff for possibly having more children can be really, really high. And that may just be an inheritance that we have from our nearest primate relatives, where the alpha male has more access to females. But generally speaking, even in a lot of societies that we know about, males at the top of the social status or social pyramid can have more children because they have more resources, or because they can have more wives, or more harem, or more mistresses, or whatever that may be. So let's talk about jealousy triggers, and there's a great article that you can read from the New York Times, and I've posted it on our topics page about this. Some of the evidence seems to suggest that of these two kinds of infidelity, what are the fears, right? So a male is going to fear that after he has pair bonded with a female and placed all of this MPI into this these children, that they might not be his. Because keep in mind, there is nothing that a male can do in the evolutionary environment to know whether or not the children are his. How does he know, or how does he get indicators that they might be his? Well, think about it. What are the clues? Do they look like him? How much has he seen his wife or the person that he's married to hanging around with other males? Those are, that's it. There's not much else. So that's where you have this idea where the male really wants to sort of monopolize sexual access to the female that he's bonded with to ensure that he's not raising another man's children. Now, obviously, this is happening subconsciously. This is happening through emotions. We do have males who will raise other males' children. We have adoptions and all these things, and that's wonderful in our society. But we're talking about an evolutionary environment where most people were related to each other and they didn't have such a thing as adoption. So the male we expect to be most afraid of and most jealous of sexual infidelity, whereas the female is fearing removal of resources. She's fearing that the man may leave, may not be there to help her care for and protect and give resources and teach the offspring to survive and reproduce. Therefore, she's a little more threatened, perhaps, or more concerned about emotional infidelity because it signals that the man may leave. If he removes his love from her, then he may love another woman, pair bond with her, and take all of his resources with him. So there's some evidence to suggest there is gender differences, that males generally are more concerned with sexual infidelity and get more jealous about it and commit more murders based on it. And then there's some evidence that shows that, females and males are pretty close on these things. Both of these kinds of infidelities make males and females jealous. And we should expect them to be pretty similar after all, because, again, because of pair bonding and because of high MPI, males and females are not that far apart. They behave differently in a lot of cases, but there's still big curves and there's lots of overlaps, and we shouldn't expect them to be drastically different. Most of their genetic interests align evolutionarily. All right, that's it. If you have any questions, please come see me. Do read the book, do the homework, and I'll see you soon.